The Southport killer squealing about how he's not well should be greeted with the same humanity he showed to wee girls. Absolutely none. I don't give a monkeys about human rights in this case, because human rights are for human beings. He's not even an animal. And there is that absolute sense. And I think that sort of speaks for, thank you, Kenny, for that. That speaks for most people, I think, who are hearing this unravel. Deborah says, I know it's hard to hear, but holding information back is what started the riots. Starmer knew this information before labelling all of us far right. It's hard to hear, but it must be heard. No one can imagine it unless you experience it. Starmer must resign and dissolve the Labour Party. In fairness, this level of detail would never have been given by any Prime Minister or officer. This would only come out really in a court case or in a sentencing. It would be almost like having a pre-trial via social media. But I do understand what Deborah is saying, the sense that something as awful as this should have been better reflected by our leaders. I know that they are not there to inflame, they are not there to prejudice, we get that. They're not there to take a side. I don't dispute that, but I think there were things. I don't think Starmer's announcement or what he said or what he didn't say would have had any huge effect on much, to be honest. But simultaneously, I think there were things he could have mentioned at some point down the line. I mean, in the first days, details are sketchy, have to be confirmed, forensics and goodness knows what else. Some of that could have been mentioned without prejudicing a trial. We know that much. But of course, the advice he gets is don't go there, don't mention it. This case is so messed up. I think if I was the Prime Minister, I don't even know what I would be saying on this. Maybe saying nothing at all was, after all, the best route. I don't think it's a cover-up in that respect, but just a sense that the Prime Minister isn't reading the room. Simultaneously, I'm not sure what his words should have been. It is such an awful story, and the court has heard the man responsible for killing the girls at a dance class claimed he was happy, so happy, following the attack. This was taken from comments he made at the police station after his arrest. We are talking about now 18-year-old Axel Rudakubana, removed from his sentencing hearing this morning around about lunchtime after he complained about feeling unwell. Witnesses reported hearing screams just moments after he entered the building in July. Back there in Southport. Judges are unable to hand him a whole life term because he was 17 at the time of the offence. Let's get a word with the Reverend Nims Obange, who is CEO of the Peace Alliance. That's an initiative which works to reduce youth violence and give support to families and victims of crime. Nims, good to have you with us. Nice to speak again. I mean, you also would have been seeing and digesting the details of this case. They are so beyond horrific, but worse than anything we could have imagined, even after hearing what we initially knew. This is almost in another league of horror.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do want to say I express just deep sense of condolence and grief for the families and the community that experienced this. I recognize that, like you were just speaking, if you were Prime Minister, what would you do? If I was Prime Minister, what would I do? It's a very difficult situation. I used to chair the London Criminal Justice Board Advisory Group and overseeing criminal justice for London and looking at the issues of violent crime. You spend time with the families of victims, and I know that right now these victims need a lot of support in that community. And the children, like you alluded to, this is a lifetime trauma. And we just need to see what can be done to address the failings that led to this disaster, because it's very significant. I was thinking about how, you know, we had so many opportunities to intervene. He had admitted carrying a knife over 10 times. Yeah. His parents had actually reached out for support. He'd been referred to all the key agencies, and yet these agencies failed. So I think more than Axel being on the dock, I think the agencies on the dock too. And, we have to deal with issues in relation to how Axel did what he did. But how can we avoid ever seeing this in our streets, in our communities again? It's so important that the agencies are held to account. And we make sure, you're right, he did this just under 18, but I don't think he's safe to society. He needs to be kept somewhere safe from society for the rest of his known life, because I am not convinced, parole system or not, he needs a lot of support to keep our society safe.
When it comes to grief and support that families need, this is an area you know very well. Look, I don't know where the beginning stages would be of trying to... I don't imagine as a parent you'd ever get over this. The best you hope for is you somehow learn to live with it. And I've interviewed many people over the years whose children have died in horrific circumstances such as this, and often they find a way, which I find extraordinary, and I'm full of admiration for those who can. But this is the process. I don't even know if healing is the right word. It sounds as if it falls short of what is needed. But this is a horrific journey now for the parents and loved ones and family and friends to go on.
It certainly is. And this is a period where one finds it difficult to talk about healing at this point, because you feel a lot of anger and distress. We're talking about very young children that did nothing to deserve this death. No child deserves to be killed, period. But I think that for the parents, they have to find somehow that pastoral support, psychological support, emotional support. And they need to talk through this over and over again, because they'll never see their loved ones in this circumstance, knowing also that the young man, by the laws of our nation, may be released from the prisons if proper interventions are not in situ. Knowing that he could be let out at any point in time after X number of years is also a point of trauma for them. So I think we just need to keep a watching brief on this and make sure that not just the parents, because here we're talking about 3 kids who've been killed, but we're also talking about 10 other victims. Those who made it alive, but they have been one way or the other affected by this trauma, and 100%. We need to look at what support they get, because we're dealing with the trauma of death, but we're also dealing with the trauma of injury, and that scar is on them forever. And so I would really ask that. Whilst, again, I thank God for what you guys do in the media to support families like this in different ways, but we just need to not walk out from Southport after this is over. We need to make sure we're there to support that community. 100%.
Reverend Nims, thank you for your time, sir. Nims Abunge, MBE, CEO of the Peace Alliance. Look, there's no way you ever get over that, right? As a parent, there's just no way you can find your way through that. I know that there are extraordinary examples, and I don't know whether people find a way of kind of compartmentalizing grief. I think that's probably exactly what happens. You put it in a certain place, and somehow through a lot of hard mental work, you move on. I just can't imagine how you can move on from an attack like this. I don't know how you would do it. And for many of those families, well, all of those families, today this case will be over. This animal will be sentenced. It will look inept as a sentence. It will be full of shortcomings. It looks as if he won't even be there at his own sentencing, which is something I feel quite strongly about. I recognise it's quite hard to force somebody to be there if they don't want to be. All they've got to do is make a lot of noise, and therefore you don't hear anything. We've got Chris Dorr, the KC, coming on a little later as well. He'll be able to shine some light on sentencing. He feels quite strongly about areas and where prison is used and misused. One particular area, of course, has been some of the people that were jailed for social media comments on after what happened in Southport. And Liam picks up on that point. He says Keir was quick to call rioters far right, assuming their motive. Yet the Southport killer could not be considered a terrorist due to not knowing his motive. Is that not too-tier? Well, yeah, I mean, that's a terrible look. I agree, and the Prime Minister shouldn't be making any kind of comment. I think, his defence will be, well, sometimes you can see something and you call it out for what it is. He was wrong. He was wrong to do that, because that, in effect, does prejudice a potential trial. I think a good lawyer from any of those people that were jailed for things they wrote on Facebook could have probably had their client pleaded guilty and it gone to trial with a jury. Could have probably said, my client can't get a fair trial because he's already been branded far right by Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner and many others. So, end of. 03, I'm not sure there's a full equivalence, but I get the point that Liam is making. Matt says this piece of scum, if he stays in prison for the next 50 years, will cost the taxpayer £2.5 million in board and lodgings. At today's money, society should not have to pay for this. We need the death sentence for cases such as this. One in from Alan in Nottingham, who says this unspeakable Southport incident highlights a significant issue with the UK criminal justice system. Prison does not rehabilitate offenders, so how can parole even be offered within the terms of any kind of sentence? And you just hope in a case such as this. I mean, almost the best we can hope for. This Rudakubana character is going to get a lengthy sentence. But because of his age, it won't be the same lengthy sentence he might have got if he was 18 at the time of the offence. So, realistically, would that look like something between 20 and 30 years? I mean, if it was 25, 28 years, this guy's going to be out before he's 50, potentially. But I would sense with this, there's clearly a man who is absolutely mad, a frenzied individual whose brain has ceased to function in any kind of human way. As a result of that, it's likely the parole board will never ever give the green light to his release. That's how it certainly looks at the moment, but who knows. They are back in court at 2 o'clock. There was a break for lunch. Of course, if you didn't hear the news earlier, the offender, the killer in this respect, Axel Rudakubana, was removed from court after he complained of feeling unwell. He was heard to be shouting. His lawyer said he hasn't eaten or drunk anything for some time. He was taken away by security into a side room. Will he return after this break? I don't know. But the sentencing will continue, and we'll bring you the details of that as we get it right here